Welcome to Where You're At, a podcast that highlights the work of alumni from the Journalism and Media Studies Department at San Diego State University. I'm Pete Frank Williams. Our goal is to share the success of alums, inspire current students with these stories, and connect students and alums for mentoring. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are going way across the country. We are going from the southwestern point, San Diego, to the northeastern point. We are going to Maine. And this week, we're talking journalism. We're talking television news. We're talking social media. We're talking podcasting. But we are also talking about love and finding love in San Diego and falling in love and moving across the country together and just getting married. And I am super excited about this week's podcast because for the first time, we have two guests. I'd like to welcome Alex Piscatelli and Jack Molmud. These two just got married. They should be on their honeymoon, but instead, for some reason, they're talking to me on this podcast. Welcome, you two.
Hello.
Thank
you for having us.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here a week after our wedding.
And trust, the honeymoon is coming twofold, just not right now. We both work, and PTO is a thing.
Yeah, totally. But it is coming, so everyone get ready.
So Alex is from the class of 2018. Jack is from the class of 2020. And they both recently co-authored this story in the San Diego Union Tribune about themselves and about their wedding. It was really neat because both of you two were on my radar as potential people that to have on this podcast. And then I read that and I learned more about you two together. And I just thought, okay, I need to have both of them on because they both are journalism majors and they're both doing different things within communications. And so I just thought this was perfect. So for people who didn't read the story, tell everyone first, we have to start with the love story. How did you two meet?
It's a whole thing. We can tell it and we can conjoin tell it right now.
How did we do it in the newspaper?
Well, it basically began because me and Jack had followed each other on Twitter, right? You follow all these different alumni, you're connecting with them, or I'm an alumni, he was a current student, but you're connecting with different people online. And I had seen his profile and I was like, he's cute, but I didn't think too much about it.
So I always say this as a joke. Alex likes to say I don't really treat it as a joke, but I always think I use Facebook ironically.
He says he does, but he loves the Facebook.
Facebook is aging. It's aging out. It's not going to be. It's decreasing in popularity. So I always think it's funny to as a 20-something to share my stuff on Facebook and like promote it that way. And so I added Alex on Facebook because I'm like, what are two early 20-year-olds adding each other on Facebook for?
Yeah, and so we had known of each other, and then Will Fritz, who's an also SDSU JMS alumni, he was kind of the one throwing the Daily Aztec end of year party in spring 2019.
He was the editor at that time, so we would have the parties at his house.
Yeah, and I had graduated a year before. I was living in LA at this point, and I was in San Diego for the weekend. And I'm good friends with Will, and he texted and he was like, hey, come to the party. People want to see you. People are excited. And so I came with a few friends and arrived at the party. And I just walk in and everyone is like so excited to see me, which was very funny. And so I see Jack like in the corner and I'm like, oh my God, he's cute. I should try to talk to him at some point.
Yeah. And so I was there and I saw Alex walk in and I was like, oh, there's that one girl that I thought was really fun that I added on social media. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And at that point, like my mentality back then was so much different. That was probably my first like 8 months living in a completely new city, like moved out for the first time. So my mindset was completely somewhere else. But I just saw Alex and I was like, all right. So then she came over and we were chatting. And at that time, she was running her very famous and international podcast, Dating or At Least Trying. And she was putting out episodes weekly on that. And so I was like, let me try to talk to her about this. So I walk up to her and one of her friends at the time, and she's like, hey, how about you tell me a dating story? So
I was like, entertain me.
Yeah, and she was like sitting there with her arms crossed, like I was like, oh geez, okay. And keep in mind, for context, I know I'm 2020, she's 2018. We're technically the same age. I spent some time at community college, so I'm like, All right, so I told a story from when I was in community college that I won't repeat here.
Yeah, and I remember just being like, he's kind of weird. I don't know. Yeah. And then I think I ended up walking away, and then that was kind of that.
But then we kept, like, interacting with each other throughout the night. Like, we both ended up at Trujillo's with a smaller crowd at the end of the night, and Alex is infamous for singing at Trujillo's and grabbing the microphone when they yell out orders, and she'll grab the microphone and sing, and sometimes they'll even put on music for her.
Yeah. And so I think I had like promoted my podcast and all this stuff. But then me and Jack, like after that, just kind of like stayed in touch on social media, a reply on an Instagram story here and there. But then
you didn't think I liked you because you would reply to my stories on Instagram and I would just like them or just like be like, haha.
Well, so then I moved back from LA to San Diego in August 2019. And like the end of August, I was just at home, whatever. And I had a dream about Jack that we were in love. And I've told people this so many times. I'm like, I'm psychic. Like I get these intuitive things. And I was like, that was for a reason. And so I ended up sliding in his DMs. And then he was like, yeah, I'm down for a date as long as I can go on your podcast and you give me a blatant review of the date. And yeah, the rest is really.
That was flattering for you because most guys were like, oh, I don't want to talk on a podcast with you.
Right.
I know, like, just talk about their dating experience with you. But I was like, I'm at a point in my life where I really just don't care. And let's just do it. And so I knew me saying that would...
It was music to my ears.
Yeah, as the kids say, rizz you up.
Okay, so did you really go on her podcast and discuss your first date as part of the podcast?
I gave it ratings, yeah. Okay. I reviewed it like a Yelp review. Yeah. And then we talked about my other love interests at San Diego State too. And she was prodding me with so many questions. But so that podcast was actually our second date.
Yeah.
I went over to her house and we recorded the podcast and then we just hung out after.
Oh my goodness. This is such a San Diego love story. And it's also such a 2020s love story too.
Totally.
About how your second date is a podcast. How many other episodes, Jack, did you listen to? Were you trying to like get the answers to the test before you like went on this podcast and went out with her?
Actually, I don't think I listened to any episodes before I got on your podcast. Maybe like snippets here and there that you post on social media, but I just didn't. I don't know. I just went into it a little bit blind. But it was very enjoyable. And like, I think from our first date onward, I knew exactly the type of person that Alex was, which was definitely somebody that wants to be in there in social circles, be able to talk with anybody, being able to entertain anybody. And I thought that was exactly the type of person that like I thought was fun. And so from the podcast going forward, it's just been the same ever since. And it's been something that matches my energy, and I know I match her energy. So the podcast was actually the easiest part.
Yeah, okay, but I would think the hardest part is convincing a San Diego girl to move to Maine.
Yeah, that's true. But keep in mind, I'm from California, and I've never lived on the East Coast either.
Oh yeah, we're adjusting to the cold. It's funny. It was 50-something degrees yesterday here, which used to be below freezing for me in San Diego, but I'm like outside in a tank top. We were
both sitting outside at like a brew house thing yesterday, and it was like 50 and sunny, and I was wearing a shirt just like the one I'm wearing right now, which is a button-up short sleeve, and I was like, this is interesting. But no, I think it's definitely quite a change, especially for both of us. I mean, me growing up in San Jose, California, and Alex growing up in San Diego, both very Mediterranean climates. Mm-hmm. And then going from there to a place where it's only nice weather for 3 months out of the year.
Okay, so this is a good transition because as much as I could talk about your love story for the entire podcast, we want to talk journalism and we want to give life advice to people about journalism in addition to how to find your future husband or wife here. So I'm actually really curious about moving across the country and how scary that is or how exciting that is, especially when it's a totally different culture, totally different climate, and what that's like and how you kind of prepare yourself and adjust to this new situation and this new job.
Yeah, I think I always tell myself that no matter where I move will never be harder than the first move you ever make. And that's usually moving out to college or moving out for your first job. My first move to San Diego, from San Jose to San Diego, 7-hour drive, was way more difficult, even career-wise, financially-wise, mentally-wise, was way more difficult than me moving from San Diego to Minnesota and then from Minnesota to Maine. And I know you've said something similar, Alex, too, about how your first move from college to LA for your job at E was harder than any of your other moves afterwards.
1,000%. I think there's something about taking that first step as either when you graduate high school, when you graduate college, taking that first step and moving somewhere, even 2 hours away is so scary, but it prepares you for anything moving forward. And I think you learn a lot from that first move that makes it possible to do these like cross-country moves, because you have the confidence and you have the like mental, like it's like you learn so much from a short move that you can do a longer move, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think a move from San Diego to Maine would have been actually even possible if it wasn't for those small moves we made in the late 2010s. Me moving to San Diego in 2018, and then you moving to LA in 2017.
2018,
yeah. It's just but I think it sounds like we're deflecting the reality of moving to Maine, but we're not. I mean, obviously financially, it's probably harder moving from San Diego to Maine than from moving to San Diego to LA. But I think we still, it makes it. I know this sounds kind of cheesy, but I mean, we have each other and we have our memories from San Diego, from coming out here. We're able to use that, and it makes us feel a lot more empowered to make. We've already made quite a few friends here, and I think, just learning those first skills you get when you have your first move, when I moved from San Jose out of my mom's house to San Diego, translates so well to adjusting to a new newsroom where, I was once thinking about, I don't know, like San Diego institutions, because I was a producer at CBS 8 San Diego first. So I was thinking about, let's talk about city council. Let's talk about San Diego supervisors. Let's talk about Gavin Newsom. Now I have to talk about Susan Collins in Maine. Or I have to talk about Angus King or Janet Mills, who's the governor here. So that transition for work is actually kind of similar. It's a little bit, it's not that much hard of a jump. It's just different names and a little bit different politics. Maine is very purple, 50% red, 50% blue. So that's also different too. Living in a state that has a different political makeup, but the adjustment is not that hard for me personally. But socially, I think it's been definitely a little bit harder, but definitely easier knowing that we've made moves in the past.
And I think it's also, there's something to say doing this big move, and Maine isn't somewhere we want to stay forever, but I think this has instilled so much confidence in us and to be able to do any move in the future. And it also shows like moving is hard. I'll say that as someone who procrastinates on moving as well, I make it more hard for myself. But I think it's nice to know that you can move and do these things and rebuild, and like it's going to be okay, which is really cool. So I feel like this gave us a lot of confidence to know that like we can do anything.
I want to talk about the podcast a little bit more, Alex, because I was back on campus a couple of months ago, and shout out to J.Lo Lee. I spoke to her class, and it seemed like every student in that class wanted to host a podcast or wanted information. So they were asking me advice. I have no idea if the advice that I gave them was any good, but I know, Alex, that your advice would be really good because, again, not only did you meet your husband on this podcast, but it grew and you had a lot of success with it. So for the students who may or may not have listened to me or other students, what is your advice to them about starting a podcast, some of the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, I think so. I'm actually kind of going through this right now because I am doing a sequel to Dating or At Least Trying that I'm developing right now. So that's the inside scoop in development. But I think a huge thing with podcasting and just any sort of entertainment in general, any sort of news in general now, I think there's so many options that people can listen to, watch, consume in media. And I think because of that, you don't want to try to speak to everyone, right? I think you need to be really niche and really strong in your convictions on what you want to talk about and what you want to do and what you want to produce. I think you have to make a product that would be something you want to consume as a listener, and make that product. And so for me, when I was making Dating or At Least Trying, I was at this time where I was just graduated college, and I really wanted to, and I was living in LA and living in this new city that I had never lived in before, going on the dating apps, spending all my time swiping through them. And I think I wanted to listen to something that was someone who was a recent grad, trying to figure it out, trying to date around, trying to figure themselves out. And I wanted to listen to something like that. And that's why that's the podcast that I created. And I think And now I'm at a point where I'm no longer dating, but I still love to talk about dating with people. And so that's why I'm trying to make dating, or at least trying sequel, something that I would want to consume now, but also my friend who's going to co-host with me as someone who's single and dating right now as a 27-year-old, something that she would want to consume too. So we're working on that together. But I definitely think the biggest thing is be as niche as possible. Speak to yourself and speak to the people who are like you and would want to listen to something that you want to do.
Okay, full disclosure, whenever I say for our students, and I'm using air quotes, you two can see me, but the podcast audience cannot. That also might mean me. So for our students might also be for me. I get all of these messages all the time. I just got another one that says, I can help you make 30 short form video snippets quickly if each of your existing or future long form podcast episodes using AI. Let me know if this is worth a convo. At least once a week, I get somebody telling me that they guarantee all of these results if I'll just pay whatever. Do any of these things work?
I would say no. I have many, many thoughts on AI, but I would say no. I say treat your creative projects as your baby and don't trust anyone with them unless you trust them. But I think it's really important to make sure to keep those to yourself. And the way to grow a podcast is to reach audiences that want to see your stuff. And I think the way to do that is with dating, or at least trying. It was a lot of word of mouth. It was a lot of using social media. It was a lot of using SEO on my podcast. So like the terms dating, my most downloaded episode was called How to Flirt. So people were searching that on Spotify or on Apple. So I think it's really like taking your product and what you have and just what's the word? Tinkering it, tweaking with it, and making it something that people can find.
There's also all of these things when you type in like best way to promote your podcast, and you'll see things like, well, this is the optimal day of the week, or this is the optimal frequency, or this is the optimal length of a podcast. Did you find that any of those things proved to be true? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to make sure to remember with your podcast is every podcast type is going to be different. So there's narrative podcasts, there's interview ones, there's people just gabbing with their friends. And I think everything's going to be different, right? And I think the most important thing for each podcast is consistency. So you want to make sure you're releasing a podcast on a schedule that makes sense for you, whether it's every other week, whether it's weekly, if it's a news podcast, it's once a day during the weekdays. I think consistency is key. In terms of length, think about what you like to consume as a podcast listener. I really like podcasts where people kind of gab and talk with each other. And I like listening to ones that are about like 45 minutes to an hour long. So when I was doing dating, or at least trying, I tried to make sure every podcast kind of laid in that time frame, because I think it's more important to be consistent within yourself and make your own set of rules versus follow other rules.
All right, let's switch gears and talk to Jack about some TV stories that he's done recently, because there's two in particular that you've done recently. One was about the Valentine's Bandit, which was just adorable, about the hearts that were placed all over Maine. And then this gentleman recently passed away. Let's kind of go like inside ball and give us the details about how you find out about this story and the different people that you interview. It looks like you're a one-man band going out there and doing all the shooting yourself. Tell us about the Valentine's Day Bandit story.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, the job at News Center Maine is so unique as a reporter because usually in different newsrooms, you are 100% MMJ, totally one-man band. Or you always constantly work with a photographer and they always shoot all your stuff and edit your stuff and you just report. News Center Maine, I would say it's about 80-20 that I get to work by myself versus work with a photographer. This story in particular with the Valentine's Day Bandit was 100% just by myself. So being new to Maine, also being new to a news market has its perks, speaking to prospective or soon to be graduate SDSU students who are going to go into, go to Yuma, go to Reading, go to Nevada, wherever you go. Even if you go to Maine, it's going to a new place where you haven't lived before is a major plus, because you have so many questions about where you are and where you live that chances are so many people also have those same questions. And those are all stories. So for me, going back to the Valentine's Day Bandit, back in Valentine's Day, Alex and I were just hanging around and noticed the hearts. And we realized that this is totally like an unspoken cool tradition that the city of Portland, Maine does. Portland, Maine has 75,000 people, and then during the summer it has like 150,000. So it's the biggest city in Maine. It's kind of we're just debating about the size of the city. But I was saying that the city of Portland is small, but it has its own culture. And its culture is also having an unknown artist like a Banksy going around and smearing red hearts across the city on Valentine's Day overnight. Nobody knew who he was. And then over the weekend, actually, he passed away on our wedding day, unexpectedly. His family believes it was a heart attack. And they decided to release his identity as the Valentine's Day Bandit. Turns out he was a community college professor for media and taught photography and had his own photography business. And it was just some guy living in South Portland, or he was living in Falmouth, which is the town just north of Portland. And he just lived this incredible life. And I thought that this deserves a little bit more than just saying, oh, we now know who's the Valentine's Day Bandit. Come to find out, he's a father, he's a friend, he works so many different odd jobs and is just like the hero of the community. Everybody loved him and everybody's devastated that he's dead now. And then, so I think I just started by leaning on people in my newsroom who grew up in Maine, also who say, hey, like, you should look back at 2009 from our archival footage of when he put a 20-foot heart on the side of like this big Revolutionary War fort that we have in the Bay. Or you should look back at this footage from 2013 when he hung the heart from City Hall. And then from there, I was able to just, I forgot what I did. Somebody said, oh yeah, we found out he worked at the Southern Maine Community College. So I called up the communications person from there and he hooked me up with his best friend who actually has known him since they were in their 20s. And she's known all along he was the Valentine's Day Bandit. So one source led to another and I eventually came across with the story. And I pretty much did that story all in one day. That was shot, edited, reported all in that same day. So I was pretty proud of it. To be honest, when I first did it, I walked into my boss's room at like 3 p.m., like 2 hours before air. And I said, I have way too much content. I ended up with way too much to work with for just today. I don't know what to do. This is going to be a big pile of nothingness. No story, no congruency. But I was like, all right, whatever. It's just my one day of reporting. Let's just do it. Let's get it. I'd rather put the story out there than not. So I put the story out there and then everybody loved it. And we have our own magazine show that airs on 7 p.m. every weekday. And they air long form content. And since my story was almost 3 minutes long, they aired that actually just yesterday as a re-air. So I consider that a pretty decent success. And I think that while I didn't talk to his family, I was able to make a very impactful story by talking with people who have been impacted by this man from 40 years ago. And show people that there's a little bit more than just the artist, that his family also viewed him as an artist, but in a more deep and personal way.
Yeah. Oh, it was such a cool story. And I'm glad you shared those details because I think that's such a great example of that's how a journalist works, right? That's this person leads to that person and you lean on this person in the newsroom and then this person leads to that source. It's just really cool. The other story that you did that I want to discuss was the story about trying to find the most Northeastern San Diego State fan. And of course, I loved this because it was a San Diego State angle, but I also liked it because it really goes to show the tools that journalists in 2023 can use. You put a post on Reddit, you found people from there, you went out and talked to some of them in person, you talked to one person or a couple, in fact, on Zoom. It looked like at one point you were shooting with your cell phone, you personalized it. And I just thought this is such a great example of 2023 newsroom. You localize a national story. Give us more details about finding the most Northeastern San Diego State fan before the Final Four.
Honestly, I told that story on air the same way how I found the story. And I figured that was the best way to do it because it was pretty wild how it happened. I think so. Alex and I started getting really excited because I follow a lot of NFL. I don't follow too much basketball, but of course I'll root for my alma mater, and so will Alex. And so we saw that I believe when they made it to the Sweet 16, we started watching, and from there we were like, this is pretty crazy that we seem like the only San Diego State fans because everybody else at the bars that we were at were just sitting there on their cell phones. And we were demanding that the bar hosts like put the TV on whichever station was airing the SDSU games. And I posted to Facebook when they won the Elite Eight. And I took a selfie next to the TV because I was watching from the newsroom because I believe that was a Sunday game. Mm-hmm. And so I took the photo and posted on my personal Facebook, and I said, I bet I'm the most Northeastern SDSU fan in the country. All of my friends and family commented, I bet you are. Like, you probably are. And I was like, thinking about it further, and I was like, that's not possible. Maine has just shy of about 2 million people. In the summer, the population almost doubles because people have all their summer homes. There has to be people. There absolutely has to be people that live here that went to San Diego State in some capacity. So I put that Reddit post out there, and I actually was texting we have a fantasy football group chat with some former SDSU alumni, and I was like, I'm doing this story. What do you guys think? And they said, you're probably not going to find anybody. They said, it might just be you, bud. But the Reddit post got it got a lot of interaction. It probably got like 25, 30 comments from people in Maine saying like, best of luck. Like they said at one time I rooted for SDSU once. Just stuff like that. But then I got a message that said, hey, we are 3 SDSU fans living in Fort Kent, Maine. And for context, Maine is shaped like a triangle. And the bottom part of the triangle is the coast, and the upward is the most northeastern corner of the United States. And that's where Fort Kent is. You could not get more northeastern than that. And the reason why I interviewed them over Zoom was because that's a 6-hour drive. Right. The state of Maine is massive. It's absolutely massive. But that's still somewhat in like, I've done stories up there before, but for this purpose, I was like, I'll just Zoom with them. One of them grew up in Tijuana, and then he transferred to SDSU and got a bachelor's, master's, and PhD there. And the other one didn't go to SDSU, but they found each other in San Diego and got engaged there and got married in Mexico. And then they have their nephew, too, who's a San Diego State fan as well. So I was able to Zoom with them and have a really raw, authentic conversation about what it's like, not only coming so far, but also, I mean, growing up also in Mexico and living in like a 99% white state, what that's like, what the culture shock there is like. And he was telling me how he brought his family from Tijuana all the way to Maine, and they visited it and they loved it. They thought it was fantastic. So that connection too was great. And even after, once SDSU lost in the championship game, I was texting my sources and saying, that sucks. Like, and so they were like, yeah, but that was a wild ride. And then some guy who lives in Lewiston, Maine, which is a little bit further east than Portland, called me up and said, hey, my cousin played basketball under Steve Fisher, and I got recruited to play football, but decided to play internationally instead. Like, I'm a huge fan. Let's talk. So I was able to interview him in person. And once I had those two sources, I was able to just build around it, because my whole dilemma was, how can I get people in Maine to care about a San Diego story? Right. So I was like, that's my chance to put myself as a reporter in the story. And that's always the dilemma too when you're in TV news, and just going into TV news, you think that you always have to put yourself in the story. There are many stories in which you're dealing with such great sources and great characters where you just need to step back and let the sources talk in your story. Here's a case where I needed to put myself as a San Diego State alumni there in the story. And that's just where the creativity came to play. I use my cell phone so much for my stories. So that was just that was a second nature to me to use that. And then I took a photographer with me, and we shot just a bunch of classic scenes around Portland, like in front of the lobster boats, in front of all the tourist spots, and just to show that, wow, we're really far out here. So it all just came together perfectly. I think one of the interviews, actually, I think I did that. I shot and edited that story also all in one day, but I made the Reddit post in advance. Yeah. But I planned the shoots in advance, but I shot and edited it and aired that all in one day. And I was able to throw Alex in there too, because she's the true for this SDC fan, because she's born and raised San Diego. I only lived in San Diego for 3 or 4 years.
All right, let's switch gears, Alex. I want to talk about the time that you spent working for eNetwork. 35 million followers across all of their different platforms. And when you are posting for a network, it is much, much different than posting for yourself. Explain some of the do's and don'ts, some of the most important things that people should know in case they find themselves posting for a company, a sports team, an entity, but especially something as big as eNetworks.
Definitely. So I worked at and basically eNetwork has their show account, but I was on the eNews account. So it's their editorial, it's their news, it's covering celebrity news, right? And so many, I've learned since, this was my first job after graduating, I've learned since that so many social channels deal with approvals and everything so differently. So I'll explain kind of the structure of the team at E. When I was on the social team, it was me and I believe 5 other people on the social team, and we didn't have to go through an approval process. So I would sit there and I would tweet, and no one was telling me what to tweet or when to tweet it. I just did it, which is a huge thing for a 22, 23-year-old. But I think it made me learn a lot about social media and how it works and how to speak to audiences on it. And I think it's really huge I think no matter where you're working, you have to kind of really integrate yourself and understand the voice of the account that you're running. So E! News really wanted to be this kind of witty, fun, also fan of entertainment person. So I was in charge of the Twitter strategy when I was at E! I was kind of the evening shift. So I would spend half of my shift solely on Twitter, solely tweeting, solely doing that. And then the second half of my shift, I'd be the only one on social. So I would also be running the Instagram and the Facebook at the same time. And this was in 2018, 2019. So this was pre-TikTok and pre all of that. So those were the 3 platforms that we were on. And so it was just, I got the job actually through an SDSU alumni who I had reached out to in 2017 before I was even looking at jobs. She worked at E! At the time. And I said, hey, I want to pick your brain. Like, what do you do? How do you do it? That's amazing that you do that. And we stayed in touch on Twitter. And then when it came to me graduating, she reached out and she said, hey, like, I'm hiring, would love to have you on the team. And that was because she saw me on Twitter being this fangirl. I loved tweeting about The Bachelor and reality TV and just kind of being a fan myself and fangirling over it and showing my expertise and my wit on social media. And that's what got me the job. And so I think it was really balancing that act of being myself and channeling what got me the job at E, but also channeling that voice of E. And so I really focused on the strategy of, you know, we would live tweet award shows and I would be everyone was the BTS army would just be obsessed with everything BTS did at award shows. So I made sure to play into that. And I love BTS as well. So it was really fun to interact with the fans and to be a fangirl myself. I would live tweet The Bachelor every week, just make jokes and be self-deprecating and be deprecating about the people on the show too, but not too mean, but make jokes about it. So I think it's whatever channel you're working on or whatever social team you're on, I think it's so important to, again, this is almost what I was saying with the podcast. It's like you want to read you want to put out there what you want to see as a consumer. And I think that was so huge at E! And it was huge because I kind of got to be myself in the process, which was really cool.
I'm interested. You used the word voice multiple times where you got to be yourself, but also I know that sometimes I'll follow an account and you can tell that there's different people who are posting. And I know that I find that annoying because it should be consistent. And I'm wondering if you just really studied everything, like the voice and sort of like the themes of the others who are in charge of the account, or whether you guys would talk collectively as a group. This is what we want the voice to sound like so it's consistent. So someone doesn't know the difference between Alex tweeting this versus Jack tweeting this.
Definitely. I think it's so huge too, when you're on a social team, to really establish these guidelines in this voice and this tone and really hone in on strategy before you ever start posting. Now I work at a marketing agency, so we're often dealing with social media strategy before even getting to the bulk of the posting. And we'll get these new clients and we do a full audit of everything they're doing, everything competitors are doing, and how they want their voice and messaging to be moving forward. And I think it's so important to establish that. If you're on a social account, or, you know, running an account for like a podcast, or running it for, you know, your news brand or whatever it may be, I think it's so important to really establish that tone and make sure everyone's on the same page and understands that before moving forward. Because you're right, you can see through it. And I think especially as, you know, we see brands like Duolingo on TikTok now, and me and Jack actually were ranting about this. I guess this is what media people do in their free time. But yesterday we were talking about it and we're like, you know what? We hate seeing brands on social media. And the reason why is because I think they're all trying to do the same thing. Duolingo had this amazing strategy on TikTok where they're funny on TikTok. They're, again, self-deprecating, but they also go into other people's videos and comment and like act as a Gen Z TikTok user would, but as the Duolingo account, which is amazing. And their social person is incredible. But when other brands start copying and doing the exact same thing, suddenly you're on TikTok, you look at the comments, and it's like 50 brands commenting, hee hee, so funny, on a thing. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, brand overload. It was great when Duolingo was doing it because it worked for their brand. But if, I don't know, Hamburger Helper is doing the same thing, like it's no longer good.
It's like Love is Blind. When they were delaying on Netflix and all of the brands were commenting.
Yes, for anyone who watches Love is Blind on Netflix, they just had a live reunion 2 weeks ago, I believe, at this point, and it was so annoying because I was looking at like the Instagram story or Netflix, I think, was on Instagram Live, and it was like, oh, we'll be on soon. They were delayed an hour and a half. I don't know what happened, but I was looking at the comments and it was all brands commenting like, oh my God, we can't wait. We're waiting. And it's just like so much brand overload. And I think it's huge I think oftentimes social managers are doing what has to be done. They're getting word from people higher up who are saying, look what Duolingo is doing on TikTok, do the same thing. And I think there's a lot of power in letting your social strategists do what they do best, and letting them strategize and giving them the freedom to go on these platforms and run with it. And I think TikTok is this brand new thing, shiny thing that people are trying to get on, which is good and fine. But I think your strategy can't be copying other brands. It has to be innovative. And I think I really don't think the onus is on social strategists. I think this is oftentimes higher ups telling people what they have to do.
I learned recently on a podcast that my podcast should not be longer than about 45 minutes to 60 minutes or so, somewhere within that window. I don't know who taught me that, but it was really good advice, whoever she was that taught me that advice. So I want to start to wrap things up here, but I want to go back to both of you guys worked at the Daily Aztec. And as someone who worked at the Daily Aztec long time ago, I take pride that we put out a newspaper 5 days a week. I think my year as editor-in-chief was the first year that we got actually online. And now to see the way that the Daily Aztec has evolved, where there's live shows and there's multimedia and the skills that you guys learned, both of you, just give me some stories from the Daily Aztec and how it's evolved to this multimedia brand and how that has helped you in your careers now.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because it's even evolved since I was there. But when I was there, I was a social media manager there, and I was trying to, we ended up having a podcast after graduating, but Emily Navarro, who now works at Access Hollywood, and she's amazing. But her and I, when we were at the Daily Aztec, were trying to do these weekly video shows, which ended up being something Jack developed when he was there. But it was really cool because we were on social media. We were trying to do Facebook Lives of coverage, and this was all kind of new at that time. So it was awesome, but it really evolved once Jack got there. Yeah,
the whole multimedia thing. I mean, I was just telling Alex, like, this must have been way different like 15, 20 years ago at the Daily Aztec, but I literally just told her yesterday, I feel like the most common, for people at the Daily Aztec who do more than one section, the most common intersection of those is multimedia and sports. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think everybody who is in some kind of multimedia or some kind of sports there at the Daily Aztec is doing both at the same time. But that's where everything is going, and that's where everything has been going for like years now. My biggest thing that I had a huge sense of urgency when I was at the Daily Aztec, number one, is because I was a transfer student from community college. I only had 2 years there, and I actually really only had 3 semesters because my 4th semester was COVID, to really kind of like sell myself and like get enough reps that I need to get a job in broadcast or in news. At that time, I didn't know if I wanted broadcast or print, but taking along the multimedia section, and between Alex's year and my year, there was a bridge where there was an editor who kind of brought that to the Aztec Student Union and used their shop to make that live show happen. And I was able to take that with my co-editor Amal at the time, and we were able to develop that show further and really just put pressure on ourselves and say, the same pressure we're putting on the print, how come we're being so like slow with video? Like, in the real world, the video needs to be go, go, go. Like 100% of the time, the video needs to be, actually, if anything, video needs to be more current than the paper product itself, because the video is online. Just put that out there. So with that mentality, we were really able to grow it a whole lot. And one of my fondest memories was actually just seeing our whole newsroom come together. I think we had some less fortunate news about a student who passed away who was involved in the fraternity system in my fall semester there as my first semester as editor. That was the first time I ever saw us as a student news organization come together, devote all of our resources to putting out the paper, video, and social product all at the same time, and just bring students the news. And we were putting out so much accurate information and giving students valuable resources that they need to know that they were safe. That was, I will never forget that moment from there. That was a huge lesson when it came to just showing how powerful even student news organizations can be, because your university is like a city itself. It's like its own government institution. And as a student news organization, you are the paper of record for that small municipality that you are attending school at. You have people in power, you have people who are dealing with money, and just like a city. And if you treat your student news organization just like that, you'll be amazed at where you can go.
Hearing both of you throughout this podcast, but especially in this last segment, really hit home on some themes to me, which I was writing down, which is just the importance of being self-motivated as a student, and also the importance of finding other students who are motivated and bond with them, work with them. Alex was talking about her and Emily, and Jack, you were just talking about how you guys all came together. And that's one of the things that I think is so great about the Daily Aztec and also about the journalism department, is just the importance of working together, finding those stories and figuring out different ways that you can tell these stories. And so I kind of want to leave it at that, is just the importance for college students to understand that and kind of do those types of things, unless there's anything else that you want to add about just, the power of students learning from one another. I feel like I learned so much from people who are at the Daily Aztec who are older than me, maybe just by like 1 year or 2 years. They're still some of the closest friends I have to this day. And I just feel like, man, I learned a lot in the classroom, but I learned so much from my peers as well.
I would probably just add that, when you're working for your student newspaper, or when you're working a social, or trying to just put information out there for students, create journalism pretty much. That's the job. You do it. You just do it and put it out there. But at the same time, when you're not focusing on the story, when you're not focusing so much on pushing that news out there, don't forget you're also a student and you're also learning. And this is the time for you to really just try different things. And you can't put yourself in a box and say, I'm going to be X, Y, and Z. The time is really here to try different things, and enjoy yourself, and also just relax and enjoy your life as a student. But when the time does to come to do journalism, you better do it.
Well, and when I tell you, the people that I met through JMS, when I was at JMS, and even since, I mean, these are some of my greatest friends and my greatest collaborators. Like Jack is someone that we both met, of course, and it's so great to bounce ideas off of him. I mean, we literally talk shop, which is probably so annoying, but talk about this all the time. And then Adriana, who is Adriana Heldiz, who's an amazing photographer at the Union Tribune. Being able to hear what she does and see her it's so incredible. And Emily, who I mentioned, it's just so cool to have this network to bounce ideas off of, and know that your greatest friends are the most creative people you've ever met. And that's what JMS gave me, which is amazing.
Well, we've already segued into bragging about different people who are doing things out there in the world. We've been kind of doing it off and on. And Alex, you were just talking about many of them as well. Jack, anybody else that you want to brag about from San Diego State who's out there in the world making us proud?
I mean, somebody who comes to mind, who I was just DMing with the other day, is Luis Lopez, who's working out of the Yuma station. He's a sports. He does a lot of sports. They have him do news sometimes. I know he wants to keep pushing towards that sports field, and him and I were kind of talking about ways to kind of strategize that, because I think for every 10 TV news reporters, you have one sports reporter, and so it's just 10 times more competitive to advocate for yourself in the TV world in that way. And he's doing an excellent job at doing that. Another person I would say is doing an excellent job at advocating for themselves as a sports TV reporter and personality is Ashley Washburn, who's out of Bozeman, Montana. And she just got nominated for 2 Emmys for her work
she's
there.
incredible.
Bozeman, Montana, you don't think of that when you think of big cities, but she's pushing out content that rivals the top 10 markets. And I think it's outstanding there. So her and Luis Lopez definitely deserve some shout outs too.
For Luis Lopez, I hope Luis hears this. If not, reach out to him. Wasn't that long ago that Raj Mathai was in Yuma, Arizona, and he was a guest on this podcast, and he told a story about how he was on his balcony and he was crying because everybody in his newsroom was getting to bigger and bigger markets, and he wasn't, and he was wondering if it was ever going to happen. And now Raj Mathai anchors the 5, 6, and 11 in the Bay Area for the NBC affiliate there. He's a freaking huge star in our industry, and it wasn't that long ago that he was literally on his balcony crying, going, am I ever going to get out of this market? Am I ever going to make it?
I literally grew up watching him in high school. And so I definitely look up to Raj Mathai as well.
All right, you two. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the story of how you guys met and the stories about what you've done. I think that this was just super fun to learn 2 different types of things that you guys do, but how much they intersect. I just really enjoyed this. Thank you two so much, and congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
This is great.
All right. Once again, that was Alex Piscatelli and Jack Molmud. I'm your host, Josh Suchon. Thanks for listening. And a note about this podcast, we are going to go on a hiatus. The podcast is not going away, but the spring semester is coming to an end. And so we're going to take a break as well in the summer. And then we'll be back in the fall with 16 new episodes. Hope that you have been enjoying these episodes. We're trying to do as many different types of industries as possible. We're going to continue to find SDSU alums from Maine, all around the world, in addition to San Diego, to tell their stories so that our students can get inspired. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you again in the fall.
Thanks for listening to the Where Ya At podcast. This is Amy J. Smith from the class of 98. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and the artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know, where you at? Tell us about your career. Get involved in the department. You can donate your time or your money. You can mentor students. You can speak in the classroom, in person or Zoom. You can provide internship opportunities to students. Help us grow the department. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs!